Man, I never know how to start these things. I'm going to a wedding. There, we started. Two very dear friends of mine are getting married in 12 days, which is more time than I have given myself in the past to make something. So we're off to a good start. I have a couple parameters that I will be working within. It is an August wedding, so it will probably be hot, and it's going into the evening a little bit, so it will probably get a little cold. So layers are important. It is also at a campground, so nothing impractical. We are going for relatively simple here. I've actually done a little bit of preparation for this one instead of just diving in head first with no idea what I'm doing, which is good for me. Hopefully it will be slightly less chaotic than usual. I have picked a pattern because I cannot be bothered to draft one. I just don't have the bandwidth for that right now. It is the Cosette dress from Alice Patterns, I believe is how you pronounce that, on Etsy. Actually, I think it's Ali's Patterns, as in Ali apostrophe S. There's a couple changes that I want to make to it. It doesn't have pockets, which absolutely not. We will be having pockets. And it has a side zipper, which I'm personally not a huge fan of. So if possible, I'm going to move that to the back, which I think should be doable. I think I'm going to have to add a seam down the center back panel of the skirt, but that's, you know what, that is a price that I'm willing to pay to not have a side seam. It is a printed home PDF pattern, so I'm gonna get on that, and that's gonna take about 6,000 years, so here we go. Printing did indeed take about 6,000 years. My printer stopped working 3 times before we actually got through the whole thing. Puzzle piecing the pattern together also took forever. This thing is big, y'all. It calls for 5.5 meters of fabric, and it is not kidding. There was a flat lay map of the skirt pattern included in the instructions, which I found super helpful. I copied it out and made note of all the changes I wanted to make just to mitigate as much future confusion as possible. It didn't really work, but I tried. I wanted to start the pocket opening 4 inches down from the waist, which didn't end up happening, but it doesn't really make a difference in the end. And I noted the center back zipper, mostly so I didn't forget to cut 2 pieces for the back panel. And, of course, I added the pocket bag. And then I just transferred all my changes to my actual pattern. So, because I was buying 5.5 meters of material and I didn't want to spend $20 or more per meter, I was a little bit limited as to what I could get. I pretty much had to stick to the clearance section, which meant the likelihood of me finding something that was 100% perfect for this project was pretty much non-existent. This stuff was as close as I could get. This ticked a lot of boxes for me. I like the texture, I like the weight, I like how it drapes. It's a nice thickness for the season. Generally speaking, this was a really good find. I hate the color. It is very grad gown blue to me, which is not the vibe I'm going for here, which means I'm gonna do some experimenting. And of course, because I have a deadline, I'm going to make this as complicated as possible for myself. So, I blathered on for another 5 minutes about my opinions on color changing options. I'll spare you. My material is a bona fide polyester monstrosity, so no bleach. I buckled down with my pot of boiling water, and my first test was color remover. I didn't have high hopes for this one. The box literally said not recommended for polyester, but you never know. Maybe something cool would have happened. It didn't, but that's fine. My second test was RIT dye, which I was really rooting for because my third option was watered down acrylic in an airbrush, which I really didn't want to do. I didn't leave the test strip in as long as I probably should have, and I also didn't let it dry to see what the final color would be before I just dunked my pattern pieces in there. You know, really living on the edge with this one. For science sake, I have a couple different comparisons here just to see what everything did. This guy is the control. I haven't done anything to this one. This one was in the dye bath. This one was in the color remover. And this is just some tool tape that I did a little color test on. I don't know exactly what it's made of, but I know it's synthetic, and I wanted to see what the dye did to like a white material. So the color remover did nothing. Absolutely nothing. The dye did a little bit. It's not drastic, but it takes some of the bite out of the blue, which I'm happy enough with that I just went ahead and I dyed all of my pattern pieces. Boiling it gave it this really gorgeous texture that I am kind of in love with, which is unfortunate because with that texture it means that the fabric has shrunk up a little bit, and in order for my pattern pieces to be the correct size, I'm going to have to iron them out flat again, and I will lose all of this lovely little bubbling. Fear not, Past Jude, you won't get the bubbling out. And so, with my too small and bubbly pattern pieces, I started sewing. Beginning with the skirt, that, because I didn't follow the instructions whatsoever, turned into a mess of French and felled seams and awful gathering. I forgot to put the pockets in. I have French seams on the side of the skirt, and I already have the gathering thread along the top. Generally speaking, I'm just incredibly unhappy with myself. Because I'm lazy, I only picked apart the side seams on the skirt down as far as the pocket openings needed to be. Hand basted the gathers back together, and then finagled in the pockets around my picked apart French seams, which was a little bit of a nightmare, I will not lie to you. So once the lining was assembled, there were two steps that I needed to take before I could actually put it into the bodice. Step one was sneaking in an elastic waistband. The skirt on this thing is actually pretty heavy, and the bodice doesn't have enough structure to it to support everything, so I made a casing and snuck a big old chunk of elastic in there, and it actually wound up working pretty well. Step two before putting in the lining was bundle dyeing. I did next to zero research for this. I read a single blog post and said, yeah, I can do that. Turns out I can't do that, actually. The idea was to have like a cascading leaf pattern going down the tie straps down the back. I thought it was going to be really cute. Look at me, working away like I know what I'm doing. Put all my little bundles in my steamer, ready to be steamed. So cute, hanging out. And away they go. Full disclosure, this is the second time in 2 days that I have almost set my apartment on fire. This is not how I wanted this to go. My entire place smells like burnt cotton, which is pretty expected, I guess. The pot boiled down, so everything caught on fire. Super great. I'm mad. I unrolled one of the straps and it didn't even die. It did nothing. It's not even remotely green. So, the place that I got this fabric is not open today, so I'm going to go to a different place and try to find something as similar as I possibly can. Boyfriend, I love you. We're going to Fabricland. And we're using paint. We are straight up using acrylic paint for this, because So, to recap. All of my pattern pieces shrunk. All of my pattern pieces are now stretchy. After specifically altering the pattern to be able to put pockets in, I forgot to put the pockets in. Then, I spent 3 days prepping my lining material to be able to dye it, and then started a grease fire, and also started my project on fire. And at this point, I had no more material to line the bodice with. I think it is fairly safe to say at this point, things had pretty much gone off the rails. We resume. I got more fabric. I slept on it. I am still so mad. I did manage to find fabric that was almost exactly the same color as the cotton. Unfortunately, it was polyester, but my solution to that was Frankensteining the lining out of my remaining cotton and making the new straps out of the poly. Take 2 of the cascading leaf pattern involved acrylic paint, sponges for applying said paint, leaves for stamping the paint, and then I went to town. I hated them. I thought they looked terrible. They were crispy, they were crunchy, they didn't flow at all, so I scrapped them. So, frustrated, short on time, and armed with emotional support coffee, I cut new straps and embarked on a sewing marathon to get this thing as done as possible. It is mostly done. It's not like done, but it's done enough to wear, which is good because I have to wear it tomorrow. We are also all going to make a big Scouts Honor promise that no one is going to look at the zipper in the back. Yes? Good? Good. The dress was, as mentioned, not done. There were some raw edges along the gathered panels at the sides of the skirt, which I wound up covering later, and I tacked the straps together afterwards as well. I was accompanied by Bone Husband and Onion Man, who of course had matching bow ties, and Onion Man took some lovely pictures. It was a beautiful wedding. And that's the dress. Generally speaking, despite all of the setbacks, I really love this thing. I feel like an absolute fairy princess in it. The skirt is super fun, the tie straps are super fun, it's so cute. I just want to run around in a field forever when I'm in this thing. I will say, I don't think I met the objectives that I set out for myself at the beginning of this project. Layers, I had intended to make some kind of jacket or cover-up or something that would go with this thing. It actually wound up being pretty cold at the wedding, so a layer would have been very good. I didn't get around to that, what with setting things on fire and all. In terms of practicality, it wasn't impractical per se. The pockets were amazing. I can fit so much crap in those things. You know, the tie straps didn't come undone at any point in the day. There was no adjusting or pulling up the neckline, nothing like that. But there were a lot of people at this wedding in overalls, so I feel like maybe I misunderstood what the vibe was, and I should have leaned a little more into the practical of it. Construction. I just spent 15 minutes explaining why the construction was an absolute nightmare. I won't get into it, but there were a couple fixes that I had to do just because my pattern pieces shrunk when I boiled the fabric. The pattern called for 3-inch hem, which, because my pattern pieces shrunk, for the skirt to be the length that I wanted, I couldn't really do that, so I just added a contrasting hemband all the way around the bottom, and it actually turned out really cute, so I'm not mad about it. And then the front bodice piece also shrunk up and down, so it was riding pretty low, and I was not super comfortable with that. But because I didn't have any dye left, I didn't have a lot of options, so what I went with was just a little strip of the original color of the blue, and I just tacked it on right at the top. And I don't love the look of it, but it's not super noticeable. And you know what? I was comfortable. It did the job. One thing that I am a little bit concerned about, just in the future for this dress, the first time I wash this thing, I think a lot of the dye is gonna bleed onto the lining fabric, which I'm not really stoked about, but that's kind of an inevitability because I don't think I rinsed it out enough after I dyed it. But I guess that is a future problem, and we'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, I am sick of thinking about this thing. I am sick of talking about it. I am sick of editing. I want to make something else. Yeah, that's it. Later.